Move around, I can see you a bit. Okay. All right. Why don't we close the door, no? Keep all the energy, feels like the energy all going to be pulled out. That's it, better. Okay, so here we are. To chat away to each other about Buddha's own direct experiential observations about the universe, about reality. Tonight, I think, it's going to be calmer, isn't it? Calmer? Or as you Boston people would say as us Australians, calmer. We at least understand that one word together. Calmer. All right. So we're going to think, listen, analyse, check up, ask questions, open our minds. And crucially, to try and see the experiential implication of this, to try and see the teaching component, to try and see the advice in this philosophical presentation of the universe, basically. It's not just to fill our heads with interesting ideas, it's to see how we would apply it. Why? Well, to help us achieve our own, what Buddha would say is our marvelous potential for less neurosis, less fears, less jealousy, more kindness, more love, more wisdom. For our sake, and of course because we live in this insane asylum together, for the sake of others as well. I'll sing a little prayer that expresses that idea. Sangye charang choke chognam la jangshu badu dagni kyabsu chi dagi chonyen gipe sonam ki drola penchir sangye drupha shog sangye charang choke chognam la jangshu badu dagni kyabsu chi dagi chonyen gipe sonam ki drola penchir sangye drupha shog sangye Charang soke chognam la, jancho badu dagni kyabsu chi, dagi chonyen gipe sonam ki, drola penche sangye drupha shog. Okay. I think the topic was something about purification, but we've got to work out how we create it first, and then how we purify. So where does this idea of karma fit in the in the kind of the packaging of Buddha's teachings in terms of practice? And as we know very well, if we're Tibetan Buddhists, we've heard this term countless times, the Lam Rim. Tsongkhapa, our 14th century, well, he's like our patron saint really, isn't he? Our lineage Lama, Tsongkhapa. According to his packaging of Buddha's teachings, he's presents the teachings in a nice orderly way. Orderly, like any body of knowledge that you're trying to learn, orderly in terms of the progress of the student. You would go grade 1, grade 2, grade 3, you go to high school, university, postgraduate, then you graduate. Well, here the same, There's something that often we're not familiar with, this idea of spiritual teachings being internalized in the same way that knowledge about music, knowledge about mathematics, but it's exactly the same here. I think it's confusing to us because we're so addicted to this idea that somehow spiritual is something mystical, is something that happens when you close your eyes and cross your legs. I mean, I'm being a bit sarcastic, but something like that. We're so convinced it's to do with somehow meditating, But being a Buddhist, well, 1% Buddhist depends. If you're 100% Buddhist, you got to, if you decide to be 100% Buddhist, you got to buy into, having thought about, you've decided to buy into, to learn, to internalize, to Buddha's views about the world. And sometimes we find that quite hard to understand what's that got to do with spiritual practice, It's kind of curious why we find that difficult, but we do. Okay, so understanding karma, then, this natural law I mentioned yesterday, it's a natural law. It's meaning Buddha has observed that this is just the way the world is. This happens, it exists this way. Like botany, good gardeners have observed the laws of the universe in terms of how things grow and very kindly articulate these laws. So we know that they didn't make it up. No one can own botany. It's just the way the world is. No one can own mathematics. It's the way the world is. These are what we mean by natural laws. So it's quite a shock sometimes to hear us, for us to hear that what Buddha's saying is that he's saying that karma is a natural law. We're so addicted to, again, the idea of religion coming from the Christian teachings, for example. It's okay, nothing wrong, but the creator concept. That there's God's laws, which is religion, and then there's sort of natural laws. Well, Buddha doesn't have an equivalent of God's laws. He's not a creator. He doesn't posit such things. He didn't make up anything. He's not saying he's created anything. Buddhism's a weird idea. He's an observer, like Einstein. And it's quite serious. But we're not used to thinking of it this way, We have many assumptions about what spiritual means, religious. So, what Buddha's, this is a major component of Buddha's philosophical view of the universe, how things happen, why things happen. And this law of karma, it plays out in the mind. So you'd say it's philosophy, but what it is the law that Buddha has observed, and the Indians before him, these amazing Hindus before him have observed it too, that this law of karma, this law of cause and effect, is the law that plays out in the minds and lives of all sentient beings. And it's the law that determines happiness and suffering. I mean, it's not the law about how things grow. It's including the physical world, actually. But the bottom line is the law of karma plays out in the minds and lives of sentient beings, mind possessors, us, in other words. So it is in reference, in particular, into happiness and suffering. So in terms of this package, the Tsongkhapa calls the lam rim, the path gradual, or if you like, modern English translation would be a course, a gradual path, a course, grade 1, grade 2, grade 3, graduate, a course. A course in what? Well, you graduate as a Buddha, So the method for doing this is to internalize all the information, to take on board the Buddha's views. You'd learn them first, theoretically, and then through practice, you would eventually experience the truth of them. You learn theory of music, and eventually by practicing, you verify it and experience it for yourself, isn't it? I mean, if you learn the theories and then one day you try to play it on the piano but it just doesn't work, well, clearly something's wrong, isn't it? You get a recipe of a cake and you do it, you end up with a mess, so clearly the recipe's wrong. The same here. The theories are the basic idea, which then through internalizing and thinking about and analyzing and using every day in your life to interpret your life, you eventually experience the truth of it when you get more advanced. You get single point of concentration, you develop clairvoyance, that's when you prove it. That's when you prove it. As you verify it for yourself. That's how it works. So how do you apply, how do you think, how's the law of karma a tool? Well, all the Buddha's teachings are that. He says things are impermanent. He says the law of karma runs the universe. He says we can become a Buddha. He says we suffer because of this and because of that. It's his theories coming from his own experience. So a person who's choosing to be a Buddhist is choosing to take on board these ideas. First, obviously, theoretically. You can't become an acupuncturist without first learning the theories. Well, you can't become a Buddha. You can't, be a Buddhist without first learning the theories, if you're doing it properly. Of course, it's up to us. You don't need to. But if you want to be a Buddhist, that's what it means. So in terms of this packaging, this practice, this path, this lam rim, this course to Buddhahood, you learn it first in junior school. And the essence of junior school is abiding by the laws of karma. Then the essence of high school is where you start to get into the mind itself. So understanding the mind, like we talked yesterday, understanding the mind and how it functions, we began to talk yesterday, we can talk more now, is really high school. And junior school is abide by the laws of karma. That's where you start to learn it. And of course you continue to learn about it and become more, as you progress on your practice, and it becomes more sophisticated for you. But you learn the theory so you can apply it in your daily life. So what does this mean? Well, basically, one way of talking about the whole of Buddhist approach to life, the entire Buddhist approach, is one way of framing all the Buddhist teachings is in terms of how to get rid of suffering and how to get happiness. It's one way of presenting the whole of Buddhist path. Another way of presenting Buddhism, framing it, is it's a path of getting rid of ignorance and getting wisdom. Another way is it's a path of ethics and morality, and they all come to the same thing. This is what's interesting. They all come to the same thing. In our ordinary world, they don't. You can be a really good, moral, kind person. It doesn't mean you're going to have much wisdom. You behave nicely. That, as far as we're concerned, has got zero to do having wisdom. You can have a genius mind, be a genius mathematician, a genius scientist, but go home and beat your husband every day, because it has nothing to do with ethics and morality. Well, Buddhism, you can't separate these. They're distinct approaches, but they come to the same thing. And that's what. And Buddha's point is this: the extent to which we suffer is the extent to which we've got weird, wacko ideas in our head about reality, about how things exist. Buddha says we're living in la-la land when it comes to understanding how things exist. Now, he's not being fundamentalist. He's allowed to tell us we've got wrong views. You know, if you're a Christian, you're told that God created the universe. If you're a materialist, you're told that your mummy and daddy created you. So we've all got these different views, isn't it? And we all buy into these different views. Well, Buddha's got another view. And the key point is to see the experiential implication of the way we think, and that often is not how we think. We don't connect these two, you know. But what Buddha's saying is the extent to which our minds are caught up in misconceptions about reality. Misconceptions, and these function in they play many, you know, that one way of presenting misconceptions is in terms of understanding the Buddhist model of the mind and the different mental states that govern our lives. One of the characteristics of all of these voices of ego, if you like, anger, attachment, jealousy, pride, low self-esteem, these simple words we know so well. One component of these, one function, one quality of these states of mind, which is a surprise to us. One is, which is not surprising, and we recognise it, is that they're really disturbing. The extent to which you're caught up in attachment, anger, jealousy, pride is the extent to which you are very disturbed. Check the last time you were depressed, jealous, we can prove it. The other component is this one of misconceptions, which is a big surprise to us. We don't think like this. That the function of these neurotic states of mind, apart from making us very distressed and disturbed, is that they mislead us because they're deeply entrenched in our minds and the depth of our being as misconceptions. The deep in our bones, anger is a misconception. We only recognize the emotional component of it because it's so powerful for us. When we're wanting to kill our boyfriend, we then notice we're angry. Yes, disturbing, we can see, but to hear that it's based on a misconception, that's a surprise to us. And when we can get that component of Buddhist psychology, we're really on track with understanding Buddha. But it's not just those emotional, neurotic states of mind that are misconceptions. Buddha would also say that, you know, and he's not being rude, he would say, no, it's a misconception to think that there's a creator. He disagrees with that view very clearly. He's not just being argumentative. You know, he doesn't believe in a creator, not like that. He's got another completely different viewpoint about reality. He disagrees with the materialist philosophical viewpoint, that your mummy and daddy made you, that your mind is your brain, that you began in your mother's womb. These are misconceptions, he says. So what's curious about this, you know, is that he says the extent to which we have any of these misconceptions is the extent to which we suffer. And the reason, the very simple reason, isn't because we're not believing what he says and we're going to be naughty and punished, because simply because they're not true. So buying into something that isn't true is why you suffer. This is odd to us. We don't think like this. You know, if you have a $5 note but you're convinced it's 50, it's logical that every time you go to spend it, you'll be disappointed. Well, that's, in a way, that's how Buddha's saying. There's this massive, he said, there's this massive disconnect between what's in our mind, all the viewpoints we have, and reality. And this is why we suffer. And that's why when we realize emptiness, quote unquote, which we'll talk about, which is uprooting the deepest misconception in our minds, this misconception about ego, the deepest misconception about our own very self. This is, when that's uprooted, we have cut the causes of suffering, which means we've stopped suffering. We've got more to go. And as Lama Zopa says, then there is no fear. Fear has gone. So this is not how we tend to think, but it's kind of, this is Buddha's approach. So okay, let's look at then what he means by karma and how you would apply it in daily life, and then how it would lessen suffering using Buddha's approach, right? So what boyfriend have I got tonight? I need a new boyfriend. What's your name again? I forget. We've met, haven't we? We have Nick. Okay, so Nick's my new boyfriend because my other one left me. Where is he? He's not here tonight. No, okay. Jason. I sent him away. So okay, Nick's my My boyfriend. Let's just use the example. Okay. So the karma, what is karma? Well, the word karma, is a Sanskrit word. It means action, it seems. I don't speak Sanskrit. But what it's referring to is mental action, intention. There are many, okay, just for a second, the Buddhist model of the mind, which we just began yesterday talking, we're going to go in more detail. There's this presentation of the states of mind. Tibetans point here, interestingly, when we talk about mental consciousness here. There are two ways the mind functions. One is sensory, one is mental. And in terms of our mental consciousness, there are three categories of states of mind at the day-to-day level of life. Three categories. And this is absolutely not the way we break down things in modern psychology. This is the Buddha's approach. We did discuss this yesterday. It takes a while to get used to this. We've got three categories of states of mind. There is no fourth. For all the contents of our mental consciousness, the thousands upon thousands of thoughts. And they're all thoughts, concepts. There are those that are neurotic, delusional, distressing, disturbing, afflictions, this kind of old-fashioned word that is a translation of the Sanskrit klesha, which is the usual term used in Tibetan and Sanskrit and is translated as klesha, as affliction. Well, it's like sometimes referred to as mental afflictions. Well, I think a more modern term is mental illness. It sounds very shocking to us to hear that. But essentially what it's saying, the extent to which we're caught up in this first category of states of mind, all the voices of ego, if you like, attachment, anger, and all the other dramas, afflictions, well, call them mental illnesses. And I mean, I'm not being sarcastic when I say that. It's shocking to us, because we usually think of a person way down the other end of the spectrum. They're mentally ill, but I'm normal. Well, Buddha is basically saying the extent to which we have any attachment, anger, jealousy, pride, low self-esteem, and the other neuroses, which we consider absolutely normal. But the extent to which we have them, Buddha says, is the extent to which we are mentally ill, and is therefore the extent to which we are suffering. And the job of being a Buddhist, like I said yesterday, is to get rid of this stuff. The whole point is to get rid of it, to achieve Sangye, free of all the rubbish. Sang in Tibetan, the equivalent of Buddha. Free of all the rubbish, Sangye, full of all the goodness. Speaking really simply. So that's the goal. So clearly if the goal is to get rid of all the rubbish, and to develop all the goodness, you've got to start distinguishing between them. And this is the key job of being a Buddhist. Distinguishing between anger and the unhappy states of mind and the positive states of mind. And right now, they're mixed like a big soup, We give them equal status and assume that it's normal. But our job, as Lama Yeshe puts it, be our own therapist. That's high school, to understand our mind deeply, to recognize these and distinguish between the neurotic parts and the good parts. So there's a third category of states of mind that I like to call the mechanics of the mind. Everybody has them. Whether you're a murderer or a meditator, you need good concentration. So in this sense, Buddhism refers to the negative states of mind, positive, or the non-virtuous and virtuous. We don't like using these words in modern psychology. They sound too religious, too judgmental. But this is a very clear distinction. And if you want to understand the Buddha's view of the mind, you need to understand what he means by this, The negative or neurotic or delusional or disturbing or afflicted or non-virtuous states of mind are completely ridiculous. They're not in sync with reality, and they are the source of our suffering. So we must be able to identify them. Not with guilt, with delight. You find the disease is causing you the problem. How marvelous, now you can fix it. So we have love, compassion, kindness, intelligence. We know that stuff. That's the good stuff. Buddha says we can develop that to infinity. Now the third lot, they refer to them as neutral, but not in the sense that they're not important, but in the sense that they're neither virtuous nor non-virtuous. They don't have this neurotic, disturbing, distorted characteristic of the unhappy ones, and they don't have the virtuous, valid sense of connectedness and goodness of the other ones. But they're like the bare bones. They're like I said, the mechanics, call it that. Concentration. There's many of them. Concentration. Good memory. The Buddhist term is mindfulness. We've got these weird ideas of what it is, but basically it's just good memory, not forgetting what you're doing moment by moment. If I stand up and decide to walk out the door but get halfway and go, oh, what was I doing? That's lack of mindfulness. Mindfulness isn't something like we use it like a big stick. Oh, be mindful, like religion. It's not like that. It's simply keeping keeping track of what you're doing without forgetting it. It's not forgetfulness. That's what mindfulness is. Well, as Lama Zopa says, thieves need mindfulness. It's quite literal. So these are the mechanics of the mind, and they're actually developed to an incredible degree in concentration meditation, because we need them hugely to be able to practice this job of distinguishing what's going on in our own mind, you know. So the neurotic ones, the deluded ones, the afflictions, the kleshas, the mental illnesses, the disturbing emotions, the delusions, these are all synonyms, are why we suffer. And why they are, like I was saying, why they are the cause of suffering is because they're misconceptions. At their bones, beneath the emotional component. I mean, we can go on about this a long time. I want to talk about karma here, but we'll go back and forth. Our trouble is we don't notice them until it's too late. We don't notice them until it's a full-fledged emotion, and it's too late then. You know, so this is high school practice. We really get some concentration, develop single point of concentration to some degree, and then learn the Buddhist model so we can start to do the real job of being our own therapist. This is the essential job of being a Buddhist. So junior school, abiding by the laws of karma, which is essentially being a moral person, doing what your grandma says, behave nicely, don't harm others. I mean, all decent humans on this planet would live according to this. It's not unique to the Buddha. His view about karma is unique, maybe, but not the general idea of behaving nicely, not harming others. It's the basic level of abiding by the laws of karma. Jesus says the same. Your grandma says the same. A good communist would say the same. So it's not unique to the Buddha. His approach about karma is pretty unique, but not the general idea of practicing morality, practicing ethics, behaving nicely. So there's two main levels of the practice of morality in Buddhism. At this first stages of practice, and this is the wisdom wing, you know, the wisdom wing as opposed to the compassion wing. It's like the nuts and bolts of applying all Buddha's teachings to yourself. You are the beneficiary of this practice. You're putting yourself together so you can be of benefit to others in the compassion wing. So the entry-level junior school, the essence of junior school practice, the essence of the first scope of the Lam Rim, as we know if we've studied it, is to abide by the laws of karma. And the very first thing is Buddha gives this little list of 10 don'ts. He suggests to refrain from the first 3, which are actions of the body. Don't kill, don't take the ungiven, as the Tibetans call stealing. And don't misuse your body based on sexual attachment to harm others. Cheat on your partner, take someone else's, rape, that kind of thing, you know. Refraining from actions of your body that harm others. So why would Buddha exhort us to do this? This is a really massive point to first understand. You know, it's a huge one, and this takes us time. Well, the usual reason, when we hear don't do this, we hear it as like as an instruction from on high. Mummy, the police, God, Daddy, some vague they out there, you know, all the conspiracy theories of they and the government's saying don't this and don't that. We hear it as an instruction from someone else, and we kind of know intuitively that if we do it, we'll get punished. So then that's why if we don't get seen to do it, to be seen to be doing it, we think, oh good, I got away with it. That's our view of morality. It's a very instinctive, and the Buddha would say it's a completely dualistic, kind of like a childish view, with respect. This is a massively important point in order to understand Buddha. So knowing that Buddha is not a creator, knowing he does not assert a creator, he's basically saying we don't need creating. We do fine making our own mess of things, make fine doing and we have the potential to do the good as well. So we're in charge of the process. As His Holiness says, karma, the law of karma is like self-creation. It's a very different view, but we bring the kind of punishment-reward model into it. That's why we think it's so heavy when we think about karma, you know. But it's a complete misconception. We misunderstand it grotesquely, you know. We hear it wrongly. So basically, as we've been saying, as yesterday, or as we know, if you're Buddhist, Buddha's saying there are these we discussed yesterday, trillions of mind possessors. The term for sentient being in Tibetan is very delicious, mind possessor. Humans are like a miniature percentage of all of them. You've got the animals, or the creatures, there's clearly so many of them, it's unbelievable. then there are many others we can't see on this spectrum from happiness to intense suffering, these different kinds of sentient beings, occupying different, as they would call it, realms of existence. Humans are one part, animals are another. So what the Buddha is saying is all these consciousnesses that go back and back and back, and when we die go forward, 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 the law that plays out in the minds and lives of these sentient beings, all in terms of happiness and suffering, is called this law of karma. So basically what he's saying is every millisecond of any sentient being, every millisecond we are, quote unquote, creating karma, sowing seeds. They use the analogy of seeds. With every millisecond of thought, action of our body and speech, we're doing this kind of very elaborate process of sowing seeds in our mind that unless we pull them out, will naturally expand and then grow and then ripen in the future in this consciousness as our future experiences. This is the simple principle of karma. We do it to ourselves. So in one sense we get this. If we take it even in the framework of this life, we understand this exactly. We know if you sit there and you play piano and you study it really well and you practice every day, what are you doing? You're sowing seeds in your mind, you're habituating yourselves with musical theory and then practice such that you produce a very nice pianist in 10 years' time. Hardly rocket science. We call it learning something. It's not surprising to us. But when it comes to anger and kindness and love and killing and lying and stealing and being generous, we don't think like that. It's very bizarre, actually. It's all mental activity. Learning musical theory, being kind, is all just different aspects of your mind. We make this massive distinction, and it's extraordinary. We seem to have two completely different rules, you know? We understand exactly, if you program yourself, if you practice tennis every day really well, you produce a good tennis player. You know, we know if you eat good food, you produce a healthy body. But we don't think that when it comes to being angry every day. We don't realize we're producing a really angry person. We're sowing very heavy seeds in the mind and turning ourselves into a really unhappy person. And of course, Buddha says after we die as well, because consciousness never ends and the programming continues. If you take the view your mind isn't physical, you know, then that's what you have to hypothesize here. That every single thing we think and do and say programs us naturally. It's a natural law. It's like, you know, naturally everything is a product of karma. It's like the law that runs the universe. But we're so used to thinking there's not a law, especially materialists. If we have faith in God, there is a law, but God, he doesn't have to tell us his law, but we know he's got one and we have faith in it. Nothing wrong. So when things happen, we accept. That's profound, actually. It's an excellent way to live your life. I'm not criticizing it. These two, I'm always thinking this, you know, always stories like this, but one Muslim couple in Malaysia when one of the Air Asia flights sank or whatever in the ocean a few years ago. And they were asked, how do you think about the death of your daughter? They said, we are fine, we are peaceful, she belongs to God. He has taken her back. So then, that's a viewpoint, isn't it? It's a view, it's a viewpoint. Well, look at the consequence of that viewpoint, they're happy. I mean, all the Christians on this planet had that view that they would never fight with each other. They'll be loving and kind and forgiving. I mean, look at it. But we like to second guess God, you know, we say you believe in God, but when God does his thing, then we get upset. I mean, excuse me, you've got to make up your mind, you know? I mean, really, it's so obvious. It's like so uncomplicated. But we don't like to. Want to complain and moan, especially if you're Italians. You complain and moan about God and call him a pig if things go wrong, apparently. I was a Catholic, you'd never dare call God a pig. Oh, my God. But it's true, isn't it? If you have that view, you can't have it both ways, you know. God is either perfect and knows what he's doing or he's not. We don't like to think it. So we create trouble. Well, the materialist, with respect to us, I'm not being sarcastic. The materialist philosophical view, we haven't got the answers yet. We don't know why Hitler, why this, why that, why things happen. We do not know why. We haven't found the answers yet. So then what do you do with it? You have to cross your fingers and hope there's a plan somewhere, but we have to learn it. Meanwhile, it's not so comfortable, you know. I meet, you know, out of the blue, I meet a person in the street and they give me $100. There's no logic to that. We don't care if there's logic. Give me more, please. We're happy with the good things. But the bad things, no, excuse me, that's too much. So the key point the Buddha's making is this, that our mind is full of viewpoints. Okay, I'd like to use a simple example. When you learn Buddhist psychology, vitamin C. Thank you very much. I squirted into my mouth, do I? Looks like it. Okay. It's true. So basically what Buddha's saying is, we've got all these viewpoints in our mind. Our mental consciousness is full of viewpoints. And you listen, this is very powerful. There's always an example I use. And I look, you see my eyes go here. And I go, oh, what a pretty cup. Well, we would all naturally deduce, would we not, that my eyes cognize a pretty cup. Well, don't be silly, Buddha says. We've got your sensory consciousness, and remember, consciousness is another word for mind. So it's that part of our mind, which is not physical, that functions through the medium of the skin, the nerves, the eyes, the ears. These are physical. Eyeballs don't see something. Eye consciousness, functioning through the medium of the eyeball, has a cognition. So what does eye consciousness cognize? Well, for the Buddha, only two things: shape and color. Ear consciousness cognizes sound, etc. So the sensory consciousnesses are profoundly limited in their capacity for cognition. But one of our major problems on the planet is, because of our materialist philosophy with respect to us, and as Lama Yeshe puts it, we make the body the boss. We determine our happiness and suffering in terms of whether our body feels good. It's hugely powerful for us. And basically what Buddha's saying is, we've got chairs and cushions for people? Come here. Grab a chair, or you want a cushion, I'm afraid. You have to sit on a cushion. There's chairs if you want chairs. So, we give enormous power to our sensory consciousnesses, and Buddha's basically saying it's completely inappropriate. It's leading us up garden paths. It's really not the way things are. So this is a huge point. It's a huge point. So eye consciousness, then, can only cognize two things: shape and color. That's it. So the logical question is, where does this idea of what part of my mind cognizes a pretty cup? Well, you'll probably laugh, but this is literally true. What happens is this: the moment my eyes go here, quicker than Google, and I'm sincere, quicker than Google, in a millionth of a second, not even a delay, out comes of my mouth, what a pretty cup. Well, that's a concept, isn't it? It's a thought, isn't it? It's an opinion. It's a viewpoint. So everything that goes on in our mental consciousness, the Buddha says, is just, we've got layers upon layers upon layers upon layers of viewpoints. Even that is a cup is a viewpoint. So Buddha's deal is, if you look at the negative and the positive states of mind, the neurotic and the valid ones, they're all conceptual stories. Some of them are dressed up with enormous physical emotion, like strong anger, strong attachment, strong jealousy, strong depression. Look at how our physical component of it completely runs the show, you know. That's why when you're a really angry kind of person, very volatile, it takes you like a second to know you're angry. Out comes the words and you're shaking and yelling, you know. But what if you're depressed? You don't notice you're depressed until you can't get out of bed one morning, because you don't notice what's happening in your mind before it hits our body. And that's why we give so much more power to what we call physical emotions, anger and all these things. We think of them as physical. Well, they do affect the body, but they've got this deeper level of conceptuality way beneath that we never pay attention to until it's too late, you know. I like to think it's like you're driving on the freeway at 100 miles an hour and you discover your wheels are falling off. Oh, what'll I do? Well, we all know it's a little bit late, isn't it? If you had decent mechanics. But this is really a good analogy, because in our world, we don't have any maintenance for our minds. And I don't mean it as a cliche. I mean it's profoundly true, because we're so addicted to the physical that unless you know, we don't know that what goes on in our mind, as Lama Zopa said, plays any role in our lives, because we don't hear the thoughts until they hit the body, until you're shaking and yelling and the wheels are falling off. It's only because we don't know how to pay attention to our mind, which is Buddha's amazing technique of getting some concentration. Control your body and speech first, which we're getting to karma. We're getting into this. Control your body and speech first, which is junior school, karma. Then you can get to high school and start to know your mind, because you go beneath the emotional component and you start to see the problems before the wheels fall off. And this is a really simple point. This is the radical shift that we can make in our lives. We learn to pay attention to all the conceptual stories, the opinions, the viewpoints that are raging on down there. It's like this noise, is it not? From the time we get up in the morning until the time we go to sleep, there's this constant noise of thoughts. We know it. We don't pay attention until one of them is shouting louder than the rest. So all these are viewpoints, and some belong to the negative one. They're ridiculous viewpoints, over-the-top viewpoints. All the negative ones, the delusional ones, the kleshas, the afflictions, the mental illnesses, anger, depression, jealousy. They are conceptual stories. They're viewpoints. Who do you think you are? How dare you do that to me? I don't deserve it. That's a completely layered series of misconceptions in there, a series of assumptions in that statement, you know. But we're so used to it and so believe it's the truth, we don't even think of it as a viewpoint. This is why all these neuroses are so entrenched within us. So his main trip is we have to start unpacking our assumptions, looking into our thoughts and theories, thoughts and emotions, thoughts that inform our emotions way deep down, which is why we have to have some concentration, which is why we have to learn Buddha's fundamental model and distinguish between the neuroses, the virtues, and then using the mechanics of our mind to do that job. So it's a really sophisticated presentation, and all this is coming from these amazing Indians before the Buddha, and they mapped the mind. This is the model that they created by mapping their own mind internally, not mapping the brain, mapping the mind internally. It's unbelievably sophisticated, actually. Western modern science should be blown out by it. It's so sophisticated. But you've got to posit the possibility your mind's not your brain to do that one, you know, which is a bit of a drag, so we don't like to do that. Although some people these days are looking into it more and more. Okay, so all these millions of conceptual stories. The neurotic ones there's a complete disconnect between what we think and feel and reality. That's why they cause suffering. The virtuous ones are relatively valid. There's a relationship between reality and those thoughts. That's the massively important point about them. And this is not the way we think of the mind, but this is the Buddha's particular approach. And when we get this, we're really on track with understanding Buddhism, you know, and why we suffer and how to get happy. Okay, so now, that's the emotional misconceptions, the deeply neurotic misconceptions that we live our daily lives believing in, that inform our intense emotions and affect our body. But you've got these other misconceptions, Buddha says, that are these philosophical positions we have. I mean, they're all positions. Anger's a philosophical position. How dare you do that to me? I don't deserve it. Buddha completely disagrees. We're going to go into this now. But it's because it's so habitual, it comes on with all this emotion. But there's another misconception, and this is based on the misconception that I didn't ask to get born, isn't it? Well, it's not my fault. My mother and father made me. It's not my fault. We believe that absolutely as a truth. Buddha disagrees. He says, no, I'm sorry, you did make yourself, baby. Your mother didn't make you, your father didn't make you, and God didn't make you. You made yourself. You brought your own stuff with you. So initially it's a shock to hear this, but if you take that on board as a Buddhist and you apply it every day, then guess what? Eventually, as my boyfriend, what's his name again? Nick, you know, does mean things to me. I've got an understanding of why it is happening, and I will be able to interpret it differently. That's how you apply it in your daily life. So we've got to question that, though. We've got to really look into the possibility that maybe the materialist view isn't correct. It's not being fundamentalist. It's not being hysterical. This is another viewpoint. Buddha's view is another viewpoint. You know? You've got to be interested in wanting to hypothesize it. He says that due to our past... karma. So let's just now get to karma, okay? So this is it. So it means action, but it's referring to intentional action, mental action, intention. So intention is one of the many mechanics of the mind in the third category. I will, it's a volition, I will. Everything that we do is determined by first the thought. So much of these thoughts are so intuitive, as Alex Berzin says, you might as well call them urges, because they're so programmed within us. We don't notice much of the time that the first step in everything we think that we say and do is I will. So if you see me stand up and walk out that door, you can deduce logically that the thought I will walk out that door was there. It's logical. We don't join the dots. We just do it automatically. We don't think. Intentional action is the starting point in the creating of karma. I will. But so much of it is programmed, we just don't notice. So much is utterly instinctive, we don't notice. So okay, then the Buddha's saying, like I said, that every millisecond of what we think and therefore do and say sows seeds in the mind. None of it goes astray. Or programs our mind. I think it's a good analogy. Programs our consciousness. And it's happening every millisecond. It's not as if it's occasionally happening. It's always happening. But so utterly instinctive and so programmed that we just don't pay attention. And that's what we have to learn to do. Deeply. Fundamentally. So then basically you can divide, in the way that we can divide all our states of mind into negative, positive, and these neutral ones, we can also divide our experiences and our karmas into positive, negative, and neutral. This is a fundamental way of describing, of framing all the Buddha's teachings, like I'm saying, There's only there's only a positive state of mind or a negative one, or a neutral. There's no fourth category. And this is not how we tend to think in the world, So then what the Buddha would say is every action we do, karma, action of body and speech, is something that's informed by either a negative or non-virtuous or positive or virtuous motivation, state of mind. Those that are motivated by a positive thought are those that will sow a positive seed which will ripen in the future as our happiness. Those that are motivated by a negative thought which sow a negative seed will ripen in the future as our suffering. That's it. It's not complicated, actually. Just too shocking to us to hear it so simply, So forget the neutral ones, okay? Forget them. It's just another discussion. So we all know, and one way a Buddha would say is, the entire universe, every sentient being wants to be happy, doesn't want to suffer. It's kind of absolutely universal. So the law of karma is described in these terms. So given then that I don't want suffering and I do want happiness, Buddha's very first instruction, he exhorts us like a mentor, like a doctor, not a creator. Well, guys, I've found from my experience that actions done by the body motivated by attachment or anger or ignorance, the three main categories of neuroses, the three main examples of neuroses, the three poisons, as we hear them say in Buddhist psychology, ignorance, the root delusion that informs attachment, which informs anger, then any actions motivated by those, they're going to cause you suffering, baby. So this is a crucial point now. So Jesus also says don't kill, don't lie, don't steal, don't jump on the wrong partner, doesn't he? But the difference in the reasons is massively, hugely different, and this is the point. I always quote my Jesuit priest friend when I asked him, by definition, what is a sin? A negative action, Buddha would call. We translate as that. He says, by definition, a sin is going against the will of God. Now, I'm not complaining, but that's the point, because God's the boss. And that's our view of morality. So in our mother's household, it's exactly the same. In the world, on the roads when you're driving and walking around the streets, it's the same thing. By definition, you're a naughty girl when you do what mummy said not to do. By definition. We can see that, we understand. So then that's why if I do that thing that mummy said not to do, but she doesn't see me do it, we think, oh good, I got away with it. But so for the Buddha, morality is not like that. It's a natural law. He does not own it. He's an observer. This really is a massive point. So what he's observed is this law of karma in the working in the minds and lives of sentient beings. And of course that can only be observed with a subtle level of mind, can't it? When you've got single point of concentration and you cultivate what's called clairvoyance, which is completely natural, but functioning at a subtle level of mind, which we don't posit as existing, which is why we think is mystical. No, we've had it countless times, countless lifetimes, Buddha said. then we can see these phenomena, the past, the future, and so on, that the grosser consciousness doesn't have the capacity to cognize. So, okay, so a negative action is one that the first level, the grosser level of a negative, the heavier level of a negative action is one that harms another. That's going against the will of God. The priest said there is some natural law involved, meaning people don't like getting killed. But the main reason it's a sin is because God said. It's a huge, important thing to understand, but not for the Buddha. He is not a creator. He doesn't assert a creator. He has no power to punish or reward. It's an absurd idea. It's not his job. He says we do it to ourselves. In the same way, when I go to my doctor and she says, honey, sweetie pie, I've learned from my experience that too much sugar was going to get you diabetes. So I don't say to her, how dare you say you're going to punish me with diabetes? No, she says, no, you didn't hear me, Robina. I didn't say that. But if we hear it like that, which is how we hear religion, then you're going to be really upset, aren't you? How dare you tell me what to do? So equally, can you imagine how ridiculous you'd be if you went home and you noticed your doctor's not there? Oh, good, I won't get diabetes. She's not here. She won't see me eat sugar. I mean, this is hilarious, isn't it? You would be laughed at as an infantile because we know it's a natural law that certain food will cause us physical suffering, or certain mental states and actions, Buddha says, will cause suffering in the future. Okay, as to how, the mechanics of it's quite sophisticated, but it's all there for us, especially in the Vajrayana literature. It's all described in detail how this works. And this is related very much to the understanding of the Vajrayana presentation of how we function, how we exist. In the universe, there's only two kinds of phenomena, really. There's physical phenomena, which are the four elements. And we used to talk like that in the Middle Ages. Now we've got a million other elements. Isn't it? And then we have minds. And this Vajrayana model, which is the Tibetan medical system as well, they would say that all minds are inextricably linked with their own set of the four elements. And we've got the grosser level, a more subtle level, and a very subtle level. And we only posit the grosser levels in our culture, you know. But it's a very, very, very different model. It's a bit like the Chinese one. But and it's coming from the Indians. So, you know, and the way they describe, as Lama Zopa says, in the Kala Chakra Tantras, the Tantra, there are these detailed descriptions of the intimate relationship between internal and external energy. Internal is the mind, thoughts, concepts, and the physical, the elements. And all minds, like I said, are inextricably linked to their own set of the four elements. So if you go to your Tibetan doctor, she'll feel your pulses, and she will recognize immediately an imbalance of certain wind energies, which are linked to your attachment. That's why you're having panic attacks, you know. So she'll give you herbal medicine, which will calm down the wind energies, which will then calm down your mind. Because they talk about, we've got the subtle level, we're talking about this 72,000 subtle channel, you know, this subtle nervous system. And the wind energies are coursing through all these 72,000 subtle channels, linked to all the states of mind. They say the mind rides on the winds. It's a very specific model. And this is the way karma is, as Lama Zopa says, in this Kala Chakra Tantra you quoted. When the mind is angry, let's say, then that impacts upon the wind energies, which in turn causes you to have physical illness karmically, and even further in term, long-term, impacts upon the external world, and it causes imbalance of the external elements. There's this utter relationship between them. So karma then, okay, so every millisecond of what we think and do and say, Buddha says, is like this programming process, or sowing seeds. So everything we think and do and say sows seeds, and these seeds will ripen in four ways. So let's use a positive action, an intentional action of non-killing. You know, a little mouse in your kitchen. An intentional action of non-killing, of not killing that mouse. Intentional. Has to be the mind starts intentional, and then you follow through by doing, you know, saving it, and the motivation being compassion. We're going to go into this in more detail. And then the mouse is, you know, you release the mouse. That's a complete action of non-killing. That can will ripen any of four ways. First, the most important one is that's a virtuous action that goes into your bank vault. Clearly, Buddha doesn't describe bank vaults, but it's a good analogy of all your virtuous, fully developed virtuous karmic seeds. And one of those will ripen. And indeed, in our case, before we stopped breathing in our past life, was triggered at the time we stopped breathing and became the cause for us to go to a mummy's human womb in the time of conception. We caused that. They did not make us. They merely had sex and gave us an egg and a sperm. And then we come along, you know. So don't blame your parents. You barged in. right? At the time of conception. You came running like a magnet. The second way, so that in this case, getting a human body is the fruit of non-harming, non-killing. Second way that karma ripens within this person is our tendencies, our personality traits, our characteristics. Now, we are very clear in our modern world that they come from mummy and daddy. That's the dumbest idea, Buddha says. I'm sorry, you know. Really a very bizarre idea that someone could give you anger, give you music, give you good at football. Not possible, he says. These tendencies were triggered before you even died in the past life, at the same time as our virtuous karmic seed that caused us to get the human mummy, a few weeks' time when they hop into bed. It's already programmed, that's all. Second, all the tendencies in our mind that become our personality. They're our own habits, basically. To lie, to kill, to steal, to love, to be generous, to be happy. Whatever they are, they're a bunch of tendencies, our own past habits. The next level at which karma manifests is in the external world, and it's in terms of all the sentient beings, pretty much, how we're seen and treated by others. So in this case, in the tendency one, you'll be born with a tendency to not kill. Like a little boy was, quote, my friend in Australia, Daichen, she was taking the lice out of her little boy's head. And he's crying with compassion for the lice. He's only 3, she hadn't taught him this yet. Weeping, you know, mummy, don't hurt them, it's their home, leave them alone, you know. And since he's like 40-something now, he's never killed a living being. So the Buddhist would introduce logically, he came into this life with a no habit to kill, having practiced non-killing, but probably certainly in the context of keeping vows of not killing, and indeed he even purified his tendency to kill. So he woke up in this life effortlessly, able to have compassion for lice in his own head. The third way his karma, let's say him or us, would ripen, is called an experience. This is called an action similar to the cause, or an intention similar to the cause. The intention to not kill, similar to the cause, your past non-killing. The third one is called an experience similar to the cause, and this is the way we are seen, basically broadly, the way we're seen and treated by others. So in this case, non-killing would be you won't get killed and you won't die young. Well, so far, we're experiencing that one, aren't we? Look at us, still kicking. I mean, look at the opposite. Fetuses die, babies die, children die, teenagers die, young people die. And we tend to think, you know, many of them are so-called no medical explanation, you know, no medical reason. We kind of put a question mark. Well, your petrol tank of morality ran out for the Buddha. Your petrol tank of non-killing. Because everything we think and do and say leaves, kind of programs us, puts petrol in the tank, if you like, whatever. The fourth way non-killing will ripen is called even environmental karma. So in the same way that, as Lama Zopa said, that the mind is angry, it pollutes your wind energies, which in turn karmically causes you to have a sick body in the future, and then in turn even more extensively over a longer time, which is collective karma, you'll be born in a really messy place with pollution or whatever the way the physical environment is. So even the way the physical environment exists is the fruit of the collective karma of all the sentient beings who live there. There's nothing that comes from a creator. There's nothing that is that's sort of from its own side. Everything is due to karma. This is Buddha's view. It's really, the more we understand this, the more we understand emptiness, dependent arising, you know. This is Buddha's view. We are the creators of the universe. No one does it to us. We do it to ourselves, every sentient being. So it's kind of a shocking concept. We hear it like this, you know. Kind of seems pretty cosmic. Our consciousness goes back and back and back. Every millisecond we are experiencing, every millisecond, the fruits of our past actions. So there's a massively different view from the materialist one, and a massively different view, to some degree, similar, you know. What do they say? What's the saying in Christianity? Like karma, you know. That one, but what's the results? You read what we say, that kind of business, yeah. But Buddha takes us to the nth degree, you know. Even the Hindus also have the view of karma, but they still assert some essential inherent essence, Atman, self, soul, and the concept of a creator. That's where Buddha diverged. That's where he changed. That's where he diverged radically differently. And it's all related to dependent arising, you know. So this is really the essence of it, the essence of the view of karma. So the more we practice it, and it takes a long time, and if you don't understand even these 4 points, how can you ever interpret your life in terms of karma? You can say, oh, it's karma. Oh, what do you mean? Oh, I don't know. Cause and effect. That's like saying, why is there a rose there? Oh, it's botany. Well, can you explain it to me? No. Well, what good is that? It's ridiculous. That's why believing in karma is like believing in botany. I'm happy you believe in it. It does work. But if you don't know how it works, you can't use it. It's really obvious. You can say you can believe in mathematics. You could say that. We'd be laughed at, of course. But it's fine. But if Mummy asks you to go buy 5 oranges and you can't count, what good is it merely believing in it? You've got to know it with your noggin. That's the approach, that's the point. You use karma to interpret your experiences. So, of course, the intricacies of it are phenomenal. You've got to be a genius. You've got to be like a genius, astonishing spiritual practitioner to know the intricacies of karma. But it's all there to be known. It's a natural law. That's the part that's shocking to us. It's a natural law. No one made it up. It's there for anybody to observe as you progress, more and more intricately, more and more more and more marvelously, But the minimum requirements is to at least take the principle, understand in the 4, this is a huge one, your entirety of your life. Think about your life. 1, you're human. 2, your tendencies. 3, your experiences at the hands of others. 4, the way the physical world impacts upon you. There's nothing left. So even these 4 ways of breaking up how karma works can be powerful. One day, someone gives you a gift. Oh, that's interesting. That's the fruit of my generosity. That's an experience similar to the cause of my past generosity. How marvelous. One day someone punches you in the nose. Oh, that's an experience similar to the cause of my harming that person in the past. You could have a tendency to speak the truth. Second one, but someone doesn't believe you. Oh, that's the fruit of my lying in the past. You'll know why. Instead of just pulling our hair out and going crazy and thinking it's not fair, I don't deserve it. Which is how we all think. So you've got to put your money where your mouth is. If you say you want to be a Buddhist, learn about karma. It's all in the books. You have to learn it. Learn it. Read it. It's not complicated. But with spiritual stuff, it goes in one ear and out the other. Oh, I don't know. Yeah, karma. All right. Learn the words. Like you would botany or maths. We're very intelligent, We just don't tend to think it's important. But how can you apply it if you don't learn it? That's the simple point. It's not cosmic. It's dealt with an immense depth in the literature. It's up to us how deep we learn it, but we can learn these 4 basic ways. Your own tendencies, the way you're seen and treated by others, and the environment. I mean, there you are. That's the whole universe. Your whole life. It's your whole life. But if you don't understand how to interpret it, you just live in fear, Are we communicating here? So ask me some questions now. Yep. That's right. That's right. To be who? Okay, yeah, sure. That's right, exactly. So then? Well, darling, it's not rocket science. Because you obviously practice one, you practice them both. I mean, it's not just one unilateral thing. It's multifaceted. We have many tendencies. Because you obviously, why are roses more flourishing in your garden than tulips? Well, obviously you've nourished the roses more than you have the tulips. That's the answer. It's simple. It's not complicated. That's why. So in other words, whatever you observe you're good at is because you've practiced it, baby. That's it. Whether it's anger or kindness. That's it. Simple. That's the answer. Stop. What? I beg your pardon? What? Don't be ridiculous. You would not do that. You know you wouldn't do that. Your whole life is your garden. You've got to attend to all of your garden. Come on. Don't you? It's obvious. Just because the roses are flourishing and you leave them alone now, they'll go berserk. You've got to keep flourishing them and keep nourishing them. And maybe give more attention to your anger and less to your kindness or less to your generosity. It's true, but you don't let the generosity run out. You've got to keep practicing it. You've got to take care of all your, it's a good analogy, the seeds and fruits one. Our life is our garden, and whatever is arising in it is what we planted. So work on it all the time. Of course you do. That's the point. This is the fundamental level of being a Buddhist. The nuts and bolts of it, you know. Do you understand? Good. What else? People? Yeah. What do you mean by neutral? Give me an example. Just give me an example is best.
So,
what do you mean?
Well, I guess I'll say the positive, that I believe that the reason why we experience certain things is because it's beneficial to our development, or that it has a correspondence to our personal development.
So make that statement really carefully again. Exact words, please. I want to hear it.
Okay.
Say the words exactly.
The particular experiences we have,
Like, for example.
negative experiences or positive experiences.
Okay, so someone's kind to you.
Yeah.
Or someone's mean to you.
Yes.
Good. So what are you saying? The reason?
That the reason why they happen, and even potentially the timing for why they happen. My intuition is that it occurs in that particular way because it is conducive to our growth.
Okay, stop right there. Good. Stop. Now, your statement suggests there's a person running the show. Your statement suggests there's a person running the show. You said the reason.
Well, it could be a non-personal reason.
No, you're suggesting the dualistic view of like the creator concept. That someone has a reason and it sort of happens to you. Whereas the Buddha's saying it happens because why that rose grows now is because that's how much you nourished it. Why that weed grows now is because that's how much you've nourished it. There's no bigger reason than that. You're giving it just a sec. You're giving it a bigger, more kind of cosmic reason, like the universe is doing it to me. I mean, 1 million people have bad things happen to them. Do you agree? But 999, whatever the number is, less one, will all not use it as a practice, will get more angry and continue to create more negative karma. So the only reason you will use it as practice because you've nourished that part of yourself. It's not there because it's a teaching for you. That's implying someone's giving you the teaching. It's too dualistic of you. It's much more simple for the Buddha. It's up to you whether you use it. That's your call, and that's because you've nourished that part of yourself, that you are so intelligent that you can use it for your progress. That's a marvelous level of practice. But it doesn't follow that anger, bad things happen so you can get a learning. That's a very common view about karma, but it's a bit dualistic, and it is implying like a boss running it a bit. Are you hearing my point? It's quite a subtle point. It's merely what you've nourished. That's it. Fruits ripen when the time is right.
Is all based on karma.
That's it. Yeah, that's it. No volition involved. That's it. Absolutely. Then it's up to us if we use it. That's the really that's brilliant. And if we can, then we see a purpose to all of it. But it's not as if there's a reason inbuilt in it happening at that point. That's a very different point. You see my point?
Yes.
I'm very pleased. What's your point? So, give an example.
There's the story of the Bodhisattva turning themselves into a herd dog so that...
Oh, yeah, okay, good. All these things, yes, that's right, exactly. That's another whole level of discussion, though, isn't it? So what's your question about that?
Well, it's tying to this gentleman's question.
But that's different. That's a different discussion. We're talking about, that's not the we're talking the simple law of karma, a natural law that runs in the law of botany is simply a law that the term we use to refer to the way things grow, isn't it? There's no volition, there's no person running, that's a really simple basic law. Whatever ripens is what you've nourished most. Whatever happens to you is because you've done it before. It's just a natural law. But this one is another level. That's what bodhisattvas can, due to our past karma, a bodhisattva can do. Oh, that's another whole discussion in the Mahayana path. That's not to do with the simple law of karma. This is like back in junior school. Basics, fundamentals. Absolutely not impossible. There's many levels and levels at which things can happen. There's no doubt about that. But the basic law of karma has nothing to do with a reason why a rose grows right there. I mean, we can get very superstitious about the wow, because the rainbow suddenly comes and a rose popped up. Wow, there must be some special blah blah, you know. It's just the way the things came together. So to understand the nuts and bolts of it's so powerful, you know. Then this, no question what you're saying, no doubt about it. Any questions, people? Yes, go. You're behind.
So what about, like, when you're dealing with other people, and they obviously have their karma,
Absolutely.
and, you know, knowing that it doesn't have to be personal, but also wanting to boundaries.
So you mean there's a particular relationship you've got with another person?
Yeah.
And are they being kind to you or mean to you?
They get upset.
If you do certain things?
Yeah, they get upset easily.
Oh, that means, okay, they have a tendency to be angry. It's called anger. So then, a question?
So I guess the question is, I'm able to create a lot of space with that, with like meditation, yoga, and just, you know, it's very clear that it doesn't have anything to do with me, but like, when is it appropriate to like, interact with that karma?
You mean to help them? Or to what? I mean, there's only two options. Is the person who's passing you in the night, is it your brother? Is it a person at work? Is it your boyfriend? Is it your sister? I mean, okay, good. Okay, no, thank you. Now we're getting understanding. Okay, okay. This is the essence of practice. This is where it's so intense. I mean, it's not strangers who causes upset, is it? It's always the ones that we're closest to, you know. So this is what is our hugest practice, to get some clarity. First of all, you've got a karmic connection with this particular person, which means you've got some strong history together. You bumped into each other again, seemingly, you know, randomly it feels, but there's no way it's random, right? There's very strong history with each other. And we all tend to know, we all know that often the people who are harming us are the same ones who are also being kind to us. You understand? I mean, it's not always the case, but so often it's that. So this is why the first level, so, you know, I was trying to use my analogy of Nick, my boyfriend. So, you know, just to say, talk about me, doesn't matter, whatever. Let's just say I'm in the ordinary samsaric victim mode, where I believe I didn't ask to get born, it's all not my fault, and I don't know what's going on in my own mind. I've got all this neediness and want a boy, my eyes glom onto him, and I manipulate and I'm trying to be mean, I'm being mean here, but get my point, typical relationship, and I'm needy and massively craving for him to make me happy. This is attachment. Attachment in us. I've got to talk about attachment more now. Okay, go back to the model of the mind, which is really what we talk about in high school. So the root neurosis in us is this primordially deep, neurotic, wrong sense of a lonely, bereft, separate little I in here. On the basis of this little I, this huge dissatisfaction manifests, and that's the first, most fundamental, energetic level of the disease called attachment, which is the main voice of ego. And it's like a motor that runs us every millisecond. So this huge dissatisfaction then manifests as emotional hunger, like constantly craving for something. So in my case, a boy, right? So you get the boy, and then there's the attachment, then goes to the next level. All this is the functions of attachment, and this is so deeply ingrained in us, this need, this emotional hunger. Then it causes Nick to look way more divine than he really is, and we write all these novels, Now I Found Happiness, and it's riddled with these misconceptions and riddled with assumptions. We just don't unpack it. That are saying, I am nothing, now I've got him, and it's kind of like his job to make me happy. It's a very deep assumption in us. Now, the millisecond he doesn't do what my attachment wants, which is probably could be 100 times a day, depending on the person, I will then have aversion to attachment. When attachment doesn't get what it wants, that becomes aversion, and it's got a whole spectrum of responses. In my case, it would be volatile anger. There's a mild aversion of aversion. The millisecond my attachment doesn't get what he wants, it's anger, right? But there's a mild aversion of aversion. It's called irritated, annoyed, upset, frustrated. And we have that all the day. We don't go to your therapist because you get irritated. Shut up, Robina, and go home, you know. But it's a mild version of anger. And it's the response when my craving and neediness and expectation that he do everything perfectly isn't getting what it wants. So I have a panic attack. Internally, it becomes depression, guilt, and despair. So it's a whole spectrum of responses to when attachment doesn't get what it wants. So the trouble is, I know I get angry, I know I get upset, but it's his fault, isn't it? It's his fault because he's not doing what I want. It's really subtle, this. It's so deep inside. Now, the fact is, he might be a creep. He might be mean, he might be jealous, he might be cheating on me. He might be good and might be bad. That's another discussion. But there's two things going on. There's him and his tendencies, and there's me and mine. So that the brutality of this view, and we've got to get it so clear, is if I get upset, which is anger, that's mine. He might be a creep. He really might be. But that's his problem. I've got to separate them. Whereas the logic we tend to have is, well, you know, I'm allowed to be angry. Look at how he behaves. Do you get my point here? This is going to be very brutal with ourselves. And it's not putting ourselves down, but it's really owning which part is mine and which part is his. It's like a tennis match. He might be a really brilliant tennis player, but it's not point in blaming him. He might be really brutal. That's his problem. So this is why we have any semblance of self-respect, taking on this view that what arises in my mind is mine, then I will know what I'm capable of. So if I think about it and I realize there's something in this relationship that is worthwhile, then I'm courageous now, I'm prepared to stay, and I'm going to see this as my practice. But if it gets so intense for me, I don't blame him. But I'm out of here, Nick, bye baby, I can't cope with the tennis, you know, I've got to go, because I'm not capable. So that's what, if we're not a victim, which we all are, but if we're trying to grow, trying to practice, then don't put yourself down if you can't handle it. Accept that you can't cope with it. You're not that good at tennis, so bye baby, I'm out of here. But what happens is, if we're all the victims, we not only don't know we can change our mind, we don't even know we could leave. So we go back like moths to a flame, and before you know it, he's killed you. Do you understand? So what goes on here is yours, so label it for what it is. But the usual one is, oh, but I'm allowed to feel it because look what he does to me. So he might have problems. Guess what? More than likely he has, like everybody else. It's called attachment to what he wants, and when his attachment doesn't get what he wants, he gets angry. Right? And then the more you are a victim of that, then you're just going to be buying into this insanity. And one day, you know, do you understand? So you've got to own your part. And even if he is a creep, but maybe there's something worthwhile there, and maybe you've got the courage to know that there is some benefit, not being a fantasy, not living in a fantasy, and you know it's your practice, then fantastic. Go for it, girl. But if you can't handle it, I'm out of here, baby. There's no reason in sticking around. There's no benefit. Do you understand? Does that answer your question? And then even the karmic one, so we tend to think, you know, it's random. I meet Nick and we fall in love. It's just random. But no, there's intense history there. And so the first answer to why is this happening to me is, well, you must have done it to him, Robina. That can be profound already. But then the second one is, know what I can handle. And if I've got the freedom to say I can't handle this, I'm leaving, that's a very intelligent thing to do. We have this weird, it's coming also from our Christian background, and I'm not criticizing, that it's a sin to leave a relationship somehow. But Buddha's view is just you use your common sense, excuse me, get out of there if you can't handle it. Please, be practical, have some self-respect. But this is a tragedy in our culture. You know, that's why I always like to quote the number that 40% of all women on this planet who get murdered is by the bloke in the same bed, you know. It's not criticizing men. It's criticizing our insanity, how we just don't realize we can be responsible. Do you understand? We go back like moths to a flame. And then, of course, especially if I'm attached to Nick, and all these, he's really a dear person, he really does love me after all, he doesn't mean to beat me up, you know, that kind of mode, you know. This is like demented, completely demented, because attachment's having a fantasy. Always think, oh, maybe tomorrow will be better, you know, and then he beats you up again. And then one day you kill him. Do you understand? So it's owning what's inside here, and it's your personal business. He doesn't even know about it. It's you. You know what you can handle. But the bigger one is, it's like the job. Is it worthwhile, me sticking in the job? Is there something I can learn in this job? If there is, then you change your interpretation of the boss. Instead of always moaning and complaining about the boss like a big victim, you decide you've chosen. If we can feel we've chosen to be in that job, chosen to be in this relationship, then you will really grow from it. You understand? It's really powerful, but that's becoming aware, and that's what we have to learn to do. Yeah, pretty intense stuff. Yes. Hang on a tick. Someone else was around here. I saw hands. Yes, you, sweetheart.
I started observing how my ability to level,
So start again.
Sorry, as I started observing karma more and trying to refrain from the non-virtuous actions and then doing more malicious actions, I actually found that I've actually been suffering more physically and mentally.
What do you mean, though? To explain what you mean. Why? What are you talking about?
Like the anxiety has increased,
What has increased?
physical ailments like anxiety, depression, like delusions.
But why do you assume there's a relationship between being virtuous and getting sick? Why do you assume that's true?
Well, I'm saying that if I accept the karmic principle that I'm creating causes for future happiness, then I would imagine that if I'm creating more virtuous action, I would experience more happiness in my lifetime. And I'm saying that hasn't been.
But I'm asking you, I hear you, but why are you assuming that your anxiety is the result of trying to practice? I'm just curious why you think it is. It might be, it might not be, but why do you think it is?
I'm not sure. I'm just saying
But you just said it was.
Oh, no. I'm saying there's a.
You said since you've been practicing more virtue, therefore you're getting more anxious and more sick.
No, there's just a correlation.
But you're not sure.
My experience in fact has been.
I
actually
see.
More suffering. And then.
Well, no, it's not more suffering. Actually, no. If you go to the gym for the first time, you come back home just with muscles you never knew you had, right? Isn't it true, though? Isn't it true, though? And the pain is quite intense, isn't it? But we all interpret it correctly, don't we? So really, now I think it is like that, because now because you're becoming more conscious of your mind instead of just being on autopilot. That's kind of hard work. It's painful. I mean, it's likely there's a relationship, but there's logic to it. I remember, even in the single point of concentration meditation techniques described in the ancient texts, is described in terms of 9 stages of development, right? And they all say that a sign of success, and even the first of the 9 stages, is that you think your mind's getting worse. Your mind's getting more neurotic, but it's not, you're becoming more conscious. So it's the same Lama, one of my friends, Roger, an Australian monk, not Lama Zopa's Roger, another one. He was a serious meditator. He has been for 40 years. 3-year retreats, 4-year retreats, intensive, full-on retreats. And at some point, it's like 30 years ago, 20 years ago, he said he was out of his brain with rage and anger and despair. He thought he was going crazy. He really was very, very distressed, because the assumption is, I should be better, Well, Lama Zopa, when he told him, he laughed and said, fantastic, the dirt has to come out. The dirt has to come out. The dirt has to come out. And it makes sense. Look at anything we make effort at. As soon as you practice harder at the gym, as soon as you practice harder at the music, it naturally brings up masses in our mind. It's logical. So there's likely a relationship. So delight in it. That was my friend who's a therapist. Hang on. In Ireland, also a Buddhist, she said, practice is actually having your hands in your own shit. So, be brave, go for it. It's a sign of success. But we're so addicted to wanting to get rid of the misery, we just think it's another, it's that's just attachment, only wants nice feelings, you see. So we've got to be courageous. Like the gym. It really is a good analogy. It's very powerful. We're so emotionally so distressed we can't stand the pain. We wish everything would make it go away, but we've got to have a really different attitude and be glad to see your mind, and know it's part of the practice. It's a really important one. And when we can do this, we can really have a better attitude to everything. Do you understand? Mm. Who else was it? Yeah, just a second, sweetheart. Just a sec. Yes. I understand, okay. Okay. Let's talk about that a bit later. It'll come. Okay. Yeah. Yeah. I understand. It's really all a question of motivation. Martial arts, I think, began certainly in relation to Buddhism. It began with the monks up in retreat in the caves in the mountains in the 8th century. And because they were the bodhisattvas, they learn physical skills to withstand the energy of the thieves, but not to harm them, but to prevent them from creating the negative karma of harming others. So if you have that motivation, I loved martial arts. I did martial arts before I was a nun and then after I was a nun. And I know I had this really good teacher in London, a Malaysian guy, Mr. Lee, who was also a Buddhist. And I remember watching his children's class, 50, 60 kids, young working class kids, you know. It was incredible. He was such a good teacher. I'm not saying he's such a holy person, but he taught it in the way that it was about discipline, respecting others. So, you know, for example, when we did our forms, where you fight with each other, right? If you and I were fighting and you punched me, I would have to apologize to you because I didn't get out of the way in time. So it was developed, it was based on respect, discipline. Of course, it's martial arts, it's true, but it depends on the motivation. I know when I was looking for a new club one time, and I'd go to different clubs, some of the places, the teachers were just rubbish. It was just this gross physical aggression, you know. But if you got a good teacher, all these kids, I'll never forget, it was their street dharma. They were really becoming self-respectful, respectful to others, you know, having discipline. It was marvelous. I think anything can be used like that. So it's up to him with his motivation. You see my point? You tell him. Okay. He has to want to help people's minds, help them develop self-respect, help them develop control, discipline, good ethics. Then it's a good skill, you know. Definitely. Yes. Where? In what context? Yes, yes.
What is a wise, like, what next, I guess is my question.
I understand.
Sort of dealing with it, and maybe I have the sense, okay, don't act out on it, or don't what's my next?
No, I understand, I really understand. I think this is a little discussion we're having here. This is about the mind, right? And this is very absolutely based upon the Buddhist understanding of karma being the main cause. My own past actions set me up. Let's set me up in this relationship. I have this karmic connection, a history with this man, so I develop a relationship with him. And then what arises in that relationship is due to my past actions. That's the first fundamental, interpretation. But then, looking into my mind itself, learning to understand the Buddhist model of the mind, and being able to interpret what is disappointment. So disappointment is a polite word for aversion. If we can think of the two fundamentals, the two poisons, attachment is like this default motor that's deep in our bones, so instinctive, we don't notice it. It's not explicit. It's not as if we're saying all the time, oh, I must get everything I want all the time. But attachment basically is a junkie in us that is desperate and frantic to only get what I want every millisecond. But it's so primordial, and it seems cruel to say it like this. And we're not discussing our good qualities yet. They're all there too. But this is the driving force, the Buddha says, of all of samsara. This deeply instinctive hunger, this assumption that I must get what I want every second. But it's so natural, we shouldn't put ourselves down for it. Everybody's got it. So the stronger that is, and then depending on your habits, the more disappointed, angry, annoyed, irritated, upset, angry, furious, or depressed you will be. They are all a spectrum of the response when attachment doesn't get what it wants. And this is 1,000 times a day. This is a nightmare of ordinary life. We're not living in war zones. We're just talking about not getting the cake you needed, the wife not treating you nicely, the boss not giving you. It's 1,000 times a day this is happening. So there's this constant hunger to get something nice, and in the disappointment we don't. And especially if it's only disappointment, it's harder to see it. And that's why, and then because everything builds up and we don't deal with it, even if 20 times a day something doesn't go the way your attachment wants, if we could have the awareness based on concentration, based on meditation, to notice it and then deal with it at that moment, then you wouldn't lug it with you until the nighttime comes. But we only deal with these things until when they're very serious, and then it's almost too late. Do you understand my point? Okay, that means, I will, that means using this analysis. Well, there you go, Robina, you didn't notice it, did you? But you had this expectation that it would go this particular way. That's what disappointment is. It's the way I wanted it didn't happen. It's called attachment. We've also got virtues there, kindness and love and compassion, but putting those aside to try to identify the weeds. So the second I'm disappointed, the second I don't get what I want, the second I get annoyed, irritated, upset, they're all variations of the response when attachment didn't get what it wanted. And it's every second. We tend to think of attachment as, oh, I like chocolate cake. That's a gross level, you know? That's a gross level. This is really subtle. It's hard to see it. So catching our response every time. The red light comes, you get annoyed, you know? That's disappointment. Severe ones, of course, the relationships go bad. The boss doesn't give, and it builds up in our mind and builds up. But the voice that's talking there is, I should have got that. I'm expecting that. If only that didn't happen. This is deep in our bones. This is attachment every second, every second, every second. So you counteract it by attempting, okay, that's due to my neediness for something. I mean, it's obvious, isn't it? The more you crave something to be a certain way, the more you're disappointed when it doesn't turn up. So obviously the thing is to lessen the craving. And it's not that easy. It's not that it's just really hard work every day, you know? And not to expect it to change overnight. But notice to catch the assumption that is informing the disappointment. The disappointment's a response to an assumption. This is deeper down, you know, every second in the day. It doesn't mean it's all going to go away immediately, but at least if you deal with it then and say to yourself, okay, that's due to some expectation. Where is it written that I should get what I want every second? Do you understand? It's like with the logic of I want what I want, it's like devastating if I don't get it. Isn't it? Look at us, all of us. This is running the show. Every second. Every second. So then one way of counteracting it is accepting. Okay, the light's red, Robina, relax, honey. As Buddha says, if you can change something, please change it. But if you can't, then why worry? So there are many approaches to it. Recognizing impermanence, things change. There's so many ways that are initially just theoretical, but like anything, you put meat on the bones as you keep practicing it, you know, and slowly you begin to see the results. But don't expect immediate results, but be able to catch what we're thinking. And that's the trouble. Even in Western psychology, they say we've got 1,000 thoughts a second. Well, Buddha agrees. Our trouble is, like I'm saying, we don't notice till the wheels are falling off, till you want to kill somebody, and you're so despairing because you're so disappointed, because we don't grab it each moment. And because everything goes in, then it builds up, and by the end of the day we're exhausted and wonder why. And we don't deal with it when it comes. So if you catch it, then just question the assumption. Well, why should I get what I want every second? I mean, it's a logical question. Well, why should I get what I want every second? There's no logic to it. Do you understand my point? It's such attachment. I want what I want, you know? Do you understand? What?
I'm not trying to take this over, but there's also a voice that says, like, but I'm right.
Yeah, of course, okay, nothing wrong. You might be right. My friend, this woman on death row I mentioned yesterday, whose husband was executed, she was on death row, about to be executed, and they were innocent. Can you imagine? But hey, I'm right. Well, I'm glad you're right, but who cares? Reality is that he was executed. Reality is she was on death row, and that's when she said, I realised, 17 years she was there, she got out. I realised I couldn't change anything. So I decided, I'm not a prisoner, I'm a monk. I'm not in a cell, I'm in a cave. So she radically changed her approach to it. I'm sure it wasn't like a saint overnight, she worked on it. But Buddha says if you can change something, please change it. And you might even be right, yes. But then this is where you apply karma. This is where you apply karma. The boss promised you a bonus, and you are right. You deserve it. It's a fact. But due to your past karma of stealing, you didn't get it. That's another approach if you take the view of karma. Because whatever happens to you from out there is due to some action like that you did. So these are the techniques that if we choose to use Buddha's view, it's up to us to decide to use Buddha's view. Do you understand? It's like all your life you've been an allopathic medical guy, and suddenly you decide to use acupuncture. Well, you've got to learn a whole bunch of new theories, don't you, to interpret the health now. It's a completely different view, but it's up to you, you know. And every day we apply this, we catch ourselves before it becomes a huge emotion, if we can, then slowly results will come. It's logical. But it's tough. But part of the process here is to be brave in the face of it all. To be courageous. It's okay, I can handle it. It's like you're becoming a good cyclist and you welcome the uphill mountains instead of thinking, I don't want this. So every time miserable things happen, it's a practice to weaken your neediness, to weaken the attachment, the craving, the bottomless pit of a little kid in there. And it's not being mean about ourselves. We should be very gentle with ourselves. But it's primordially deep in every one of us. It's what's run the universe, Buddha says. You with me? And slowly, darling, slowly. Have a little weep. Pick it up and just carry on and keep going. Isn't it? What else, people? Yes. Start again. I missed you.
When you're considering
I understand. Oh, darling, I think in many kinds meditation is the dumbest thing to do. I mean, we're also crazy, you know. I mean, not even just forget mental illness, forget ordinary behaviour. Like as a child, because I was very volatile, the dumbest idea to give me meditation was stupid. It's just like naive, because it's like almost in the West we think it is some magical thing that happens, but it's not. It's demented. If you've got a kid who's really wild, just got wild energy, channel the energy. Don't tell him to sit down and suffocate it. Even when I first became a Buddhist, and I was 32, I thought the idea of meditation was the dumbest thing I'd ever heard. I didn't even pretend to try and meditate. I didn't even pretend to try. It was clearly not what I wanted action. I wanted to do things. So I became a nun. That seemed to suit me. And I wanted to get on with doing things. It took me probably 7 years to begin to want to sit down and do boring old meditation. So we've got to know ourselves. But there's this insanity, this absurd, cliched idea of meditation in the modern world, like some magical trip. It's a very kind of advance, actually, to be able to know what to do with your mind. And many crazy people, as Lama, in this book I'm just finishing editing of Lama Yeshe's on Mahamudra, the trouble is people meditate for all the wrong reasons and think it's some mystical thing and they end up in the psychiatric hospital. It's a fact, because the mind is such a powerful thing. That's why in Buddhist psychology, Buddhist practice, and I haven't, karma's the first one. Control your body and speech first. So harness your physical and verbal energy. Give a person practices to help them use their physical and verbal energy in a constructive way. And then slowly you'll be able to go to high school and start to look at your mind. It's way more advanced. Do you understand? So meditation is not the answer. My God, no, of course not, in many cases. What, darling? Well, channel the energies mean use the physical and verbal energy in a different way. Even one friend of mine, he's got a kid who's really berserk energy. He makes him do the vacuum cleaning up and down, runs the vacuum cleaner up and down the lounge. Well, this is not kind of destroying people. He's cleaning the floor. And he gets excited about vacuum these 3 or something, you know. I mean practical. Do martial arts. Do something strong. Play tennis. But it's using your body. It's so much more hard to concentrate on the mind when the mind's so berserk. People go, if you're not even called mentally ill or crazy, our mind's crazy. But use your physical energy to do something useful. Channel it in that sense. This is my nature. Completely into doing things. As soon as I became a nun, I wanted to do, my job's always, my life's been publishing and editing. I was using my physical and verbal energy. Wow, fantastic. Do you understand? And then, especially if it's a virtuous thing, helping others and doing the garden or going off to the bush, like all these, people bring up the kids to go out to the bush and climb mountains or something. Well, whatever you like, Are we communicating here? And then, but also just to question your point, using strict Buddhist view, an illness is not caused by genetics. It's due to past karma that I'm born to a mummy who's got the tendency to get cancer or depression, but it's my past karma in my mind that I get born to that particular mummy. So, of course, it's genetic in the sense that it's physically impacted, but it's due to my own past actions that I have that tendency in the first place. Pardon?
Yeah, that was my next question.
Absolutely, everything. It can only be karma, yeah. But it's a physical component. I mean, of course it is. Mummy's got cancerous genes. I get born to that mummy with cancerous genes due to my past karma to get that illness. In that sense, you understand? And the fact is, some people are so extremely mentally ill. The best we can do is love them and protect them, and yes, use drugs, but be sensible. So many drugs just zonk people out of their brains and make things worse. It's so tragic, isn't it? So now your question, what's your name? Who? Lydia. Okay, Lydia. That's Lydia's question. Well, this is where Buddha diverged from the prevailing positions at the time. There's genius meditators and philosophers. He went further, he would say, and said there's not an essential essence, soul, intrinsic, independent entity there called a self, or indeed, in terms of the universe, there's no person overseeing. So in a sense, speaking loosely, basically the position of the creator religions, even including the Hindus, there is some essential energy that they call God that oversees everything. Well, Buddha says, no, you don't need that. We do fine on our own, creating our own good and bad karma. We don't need policing. And the same with the self. The self is like an internal creator. It's a person, it's a little piece of us that oversees everything else. He says, no, there's nothing like that. We don't need anything like that. But it doesn't mean there's not a self. It's just this understanding of what the self is different. It's quite a subtle point. Yeah, that's right. Exactly. Exactly. Depending on causal conditions and karma. Pardon? No, no. He doesn't use that word. You could say that, okay, he talks only about we have mind and we have body. Mind has got there's a gross level, which is this conceptual and sensory that we function day to day. We have subtle consciousness, and then we have very subtle consciousness. So you could argue loosely that very subtle consciousness, which is the subtlest level of Lydia's being, such that when she dies, that's what continues, and then carries the imprints of the karma Lydia has created. But it's not so much that there isn't something that goes from life to life, it's more the way the thing exists. So the Buddha's view is the position that the Hindus have, or the Christians have, the nature of a soul is something that's permanent, uncaused, intrinsic and independent. He argues that that is not a possibility. There is something that goes from life to life. There isn't even, you can even say conventionally, of course there's a Lydia, but it's the way it exists. This is the Buddha's point, it's how it exists. He doesn't, what? What? No, there is no soul. He doesn't, no, again, I'm trying to repeat what I'm saying. We tend to think there's body, there's consciousness, and then there's soul. Buddha says there's body and there's consciousness. So what I'm saying is, speaking loosely, very subtle consciousness, the subtlest level of your being, is it will continue to life, will never end. But that, I'm saying loosely, that could be the equivalent of soul, but it's called consciousness. There's only consciousness, there's levels of consciousness. There's not a third component. He says that's not a possibility, and it's the philosophical arguments about how it exists that's the real point, which is Buddha's views where he diverged. No, Buddha doesn't talk like that. No, your very subtle consciousness. In the death process, we go from it's described in 8 stages of deconstruction of the components of the person. So at the grossest level, the senses cease, the grosser level of consciousness ceases when you stop breathing, then your subtle consciousness ceases, all the different channels, everything cease functioning, you get ever more subtle. The mind gets ever more subtle, ever more subtle, ever more subtle, until finally the final stage, they call it the very subtle consciousness or clear light consciousness, the subtlest level of Lydia's being, coming beginninglessly and endlessly, and then that's carrying all the imprints of all the karma you've created since beginningless time, and then depending on the karma that was triggered when you stop breathing, then that will take you to the next life, and it could be to it's not as if it's wholly in its nature, clear light consciousness. It's just simply the subtlest level of your being, and it's on the spectrum of your consciousness, not a separate piece. And it too is impermanent and interdependent, and it's carrying all the imprints of all the karma you've created, and then due to how you died, you'll then zap out of that body and then run to the next mummy, and so on and so forth, depending on your karma. Well, it is true. That is how it is. Buddha doesn't use the word soul. That's what he calls very subtle consciousness. But it's not, it's how it exists is how he distinguishes it from the Christians and the Muslims and the Hindus. They talk about some separate thing that is a gift from God, that is permanent, unchanging, and is pure. There's no concept like that. Whereas on the other hand, Buddha would say that mind in its nature is pure, and we can depollute it by practicing, and then we become this pure being, blissful and radiant. But he doesn't distinguish any part of us as a soul. He only uses the word consciousness or mind. Do you see? Okay, good. Yes. Absolutely, absolutely. In the Buddhist teachings, when we learn about the wisdom teachings, and the best framework Tsongkhapa says the best framework for understanding reality, conventional truth, and ultimate truth is what they call the two truths. And so dependent arising or dependent origination is the shorthand for the way that everything exists conventionally. And then ultimately, which is proved by dependent arising, ultimately emptiness is the essence of how things, we haven't gone into that, and we'll go into it probably tomorrow or something, we'll see what happens. But basically, there are three levels of dependent arising, three levels at which things function or exist interdependently. The first one is cause and effect. So karma, the law of cause and effect, is a perfect example of dependent arising. You understand? Yeah. Got it. Okay, good, fantastic. What else, people? Here you go. Yeah. Yeah. Our whole entire life is a garden.
Correct. And from a Buddhist perspective, in this human rebirth, when we have the consciousness to perceive our karmas,
Yeah.
would it be worthwhile to attempt to identify the seeds we've collected in previous lifetimes, or our efforts be focused only on those seeds that are ripening from our actions?
No, it's very interesting. Okay, so back to junior school, okay, we learned first about the abiding by the laws of karma. As Lama Zopa puts it, the most urgent, first, entry-level, junior school, urgent level of practice first. Back off and don't harm others. Don't sow more negative seeds. Whatever your garden is now, at least the first level is stop sowing more negative seeds, which will ripen as your future suffering. So he exhorts us not to kill, steal, or jump on the wrong partner. Then 4 of the speech. Don't lie, don't badmouth behind backs, don't abuse people, and don't just rabbit on about nothing. 7 little baby actions of body and speech. At least don't sow those more seeds, because it'll ripen as your future suffering. That's the most urgent level of practice, which is the practice of ethics and discipline. Fantastic. And then you've got to now take care of the garden already, of the seeds that haven't yet ripened. And there's billions of those. And that's called purification, which is what we're supposed to talk about tonight. So I'll give a summary now, and we'll go into more detail tomorrow. So it's all to do with karma. So it's the same as your garden. You first at least stop sowing more negative ones, and now you know there's been billions of seeds planted and they haven't ripened yet, and you realise a load of rubbish ones, so you better start taking care of them, right? So that means, this is a nice analogy, they talk about, there's a summary of these 4 points, and the 4 R's is a good way to remember. The 4 R's. We're Boston people here. R's, Australians. Regret, reliance, the remedy, and resolve. And I'll describe briefly, and we'll go into more detail tomorrow. And all this is the mind creating karma. So the first is to own the fact that you grew those dumb seeds. You killed and lied and stole in the past. You planted all these poison seeds in the past because you realize you've had all these lifetimes. So you really know you do not want them to ripen. You're going to get ahead of the game, baby. So the first step is to acknowledge that you did it and think, what a fool, I can't believe I planted all those dumb seeds. Quick, what can I do about it to prevent them from ripening? A simple analogy. That means you regret, you're killing, you're lying, you're stealing, you're bad-mouthing, you're cheating, and from countless lives. You don't remember them all. And given that your mind goes back and back, you accept the logic that you must have done them. So you happily own them. It's not, and this is where it's so different from guilt. Unbelievably different. Dalai Lama was asked one time, what's the difference between this attitude of regret, like a healthy acknowledgement that I did those dumb things, and the guilt? And it's a very simple way he put it, you know. He said, guilt, you look in the past and you go, oh, I did this and I did that and I did this, and then you go, and I'm a bad person. And we love that attitude. We go to it automatically, and that's the irony of ego. And that's very much, it is anger. It's like saying, you did this, and you did that, and you did this, and you're a bad person. Well, except that we're the object. And it's just neurotic. It's absurd, it's meaningless, it doesn't help, and it just makes everything worse, in fact. So this regret is the same, he said. The first part is the same. You look back in the past, well, I did sow all those dumb seeds. I didn't realize what I'm doing. I didn't know it was negative then. What a fool I am. It's like all that sugar you ate, you didn't realize it would cause diabetes. You don't get guilty about it. That would be ridiculous. You own it happily, because now you can do the process of changing it. So it's owning it. Now you say, what can I do about it? It's much more healthy, much more wholesome. This is a huge, important first step. Then the second one is you think, well, whom can I turn to? Where's the doctor? And this is the difference between the Christian view of relying upon God, who's your creator. So the natural view of a Christian is because God is my creator and I went against his will, I must recognize to God I did it, but then I have to beg him to forgive me. But there's zero to do with that in Buddhism. Buddha is a very nice person. He would forgive you. But that's like going to your doctor and saying, you've just confessed to all that sugar. Can you please forgive me and heal me? She'll laugh at you. She'll happily forgive you. What good is it? Because you created your own suffering. So you rely upon the Buddha like your doctor. And that's the attitude you'd have as a Buddhist. So you're delighted you've got a decent doctor who's got some decent methods that you can use to heal yourself. That's refuge, the first part. But the second part, you can incorporate there, especially if it's actions that have harmed others. The first one, regret, is like compassion for yourself. I can't believe I'm dumb. I did all these dumb things. I sowed these dumb seeds. I didn't know when I did it that it was going to ripen as my suffering. And you know what, honey? You say to yourself, I don't want more suffering. So it's a wholesome attitude of self-respect, like all that sugar you ate. You understand? So now you have compassion for those you've harmed. You regret for their sake in the second step. The third one is you take the remedy. So here you can do anything to counteract. In daily life, you can help others, be kind, don't lie, don't steal. That's a practical application, an antidote, as they call it. Or here, this particular practice in Tibetan Buddhism. We'll talk more tomorrow. Where you visualize Buddha, you say a certain mantra. All the Tibetan Buddhists would say any practices you do that bring in the Buddha have much more potency. Got to think about that. So this third step is where you do this particular meditation of visualizing and purifying, etc., etc. That's the antidote, or the remedy. And the fourth one, logically, I better not do that again. So it's practical, very practical. Do you understand? That's the essence of the purification practice. And this is the essence of junior school practice. If we're going to abide by the laws of karma, don't kill, don't lie, don't rape, don't this, don't that, and purify our past negative karma, you're on a roll, babe. You can relax. You've got a good life. And then you can die happy and you get another decent human life and keep on bopping. But you can do more as well. So we're just talking junior school. That's the essence of it. The first one is at least don't sow more seeds, and the next one is deal with the seeds you've already planted before they ripen. It kind of makes sense, using this concept. Well, yes, of course, if you have a teacher, they'd know very well the karma you've created, and on that basis, they'd give you certain medicines, if you like. They'd know how to interpret what medicines you need. So that's why, one teacher might tell you to do this particular practice, that particular practice. That's based on their wisdom, absolutely. Knowing what's best for you, definitely. What medicine's best for you, for sure. Time to go home, isn't it? 8:50. Any questions? Yes? When did I? When I was 31 and a half. That's 42, 43 years ago, I think. I forget. Anyway, whatever. I was 32, I think, when I met these Tibetans. And, it was before that, really. It actually began when I was born, I have to say. As soon as I went to Mass, I was a Catholic, as soon as I went to Mass, I recognized, I came home delighted and announced my job was to be a priest, because that's what it was so clear to me. Even my school uniform at the Catholic convent, I don't have it on now, but we have a yellow blouse, right? My school uniform, we had a saffron-coloured blouse and a maroon-coloured twin set. So I've been a Tibetan Buddhist since I was born, And I always wanted to be a nun. I was naughty as can be. I always wanted to be a nun. But then I became a hippie, like I mentioned yesterday, Decided it was goodbye God, hello boys. And then I was kind of looking for some... And I gradually, as I got through my process, I never wanted to have babies, okay? I never wanted to live with a human being. I wouldn't say anything, but when people said they want to get married, have babies, I'd be kind of having hyperventilation, Thinking, how could you live in the same bed as another person all the time? I'd rather go to prison. I try to not convey my horror, So it's just karma. My monastic karma obviously is quite strong. So by the time, I remember when I was doing all my radical kind of political activity, very noble and everything, blah, 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 I remember a vivid point when I stopped and I said to there's a big shift in my mind. I decided I would give up sexual relations. It was very clear to me, very clear. I said to myself, it sounds ridiculous, I said to myself, I'll never forget the words. I said, I don't want to give myself just to one person. I want to give myself to everybody. I didn't mean sexually. I meant whatever I meant, And it was crystal clear in that second that didn't want relationships anymore. It was like an immense relief to me. And then slowly, I was 30, And then by that point, then I gradually gave up, what was it, cigarettes, marijuana, speed, alcohol. And by that point, I bumped into the Tibetan Lamas, and I thought, oh, there's the next step, become a nun. It was sort of obvious, you know. Finally, I'd found it. So it was a bit of an evolution, okay? Do you understand? Okay. I mean, it was a no-brainer for me. I can't even imagine. I always say if I had a husband and children, they'd be dead husbands and children. So just as well, the Buddha's got me first. And I haven't had a second of not wanting to be a nun yet. I'm 73 now, 74, whatever. Still happy with it. Still working. Might as well wait till next life now that I have whatever. Somebody else, something. That's enough for tonight. Yes? Yes, enough. Okay, good. Okay, so we do this little prayer again, dedicate, just like bookends. We do the motivation at the beginning and the dedication at the end. So we said at the beginning, we're going to listen to these teachings, think about the meaning, and that includes me, I promise, to see if there's something useful we can take in our lives to help us develop our marvelous potential for our sake and the sake of others. Thinking like that. So we think now, the end, these seeds we have planted, and as many moments as there are in this 2 hours is as many seeds we planted, and they won't go astray. We might not remember 99% of them, doesn't matter, they're all gone in. So delight in that. And maybe nourish these seeds with our efforts, with our practice every second, you know, and try to be delighted in our practice, not always remembering the miserable things. You know, it's so important. Give ourselves courage. And may these seeds grow in the future in the development of my amazing potential so I really can be of benefit to so many beings. Gewadi Nyududag Lama Sangye Drub Gyurne Drowa Chikyang Malupa Dei Sala Kupasho Jangchob Semchog Rinpoche Ma Ke Panam Ke Gyuchig Ke Panyampa Me Payang Gong Ne Gong Du Pavasho. Okie dokie. Thank you, everybody. Happy to be back in Boston. Always looks so familiar. New faces, but it looks very familiar. Oh, really? Okie doke. All right then, come on. You want to. Does that mean I won't see you again, does it? Oh, okay, come on.